Middlesex. I don't know why I always had that challenge.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank my colleague for his impassioned speech. But there is something I would disagree with on him, and that is, Conservatives, Mr. Speaker, have been standing up for farmers nonstop. I come from a very heavy grain area where my farmers right now are telling me that their corn is coming in at 30% moisture, 28% moisture, and they need to get their corn dried down to 13%, 15%. Well, guess what? You have to use natural gas or propane in order to dry the grain because guess what? There is no other commercially viable option to dry grain in such huge amounts. And in Northern Ontario, we have grain farms that are 20,000 acres, 15,000 acres, as much like the prairies. And we have senators in the Senate who are stalling this legislation who are from Northern Ontario who should know that the cost is exuberant for these farmers to dry their grain. So I'm wondering if my colleague could comment, Mr. Speaker, on why these senators from Northern Ontario should not be held accountable by the constituents that they are supposed to represent, and why Canadians should not be able to call their senators to voice their concerns.
The honourable member for Cowichan-Malahat Langford.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I mean, all good points. That's why I voted for the bill. We understood very clearly from committee hearings on this bill that there are no commercially viable alternatives. And I would say that those problems with drying grain, with getting appropriate levels of feed because of future droughts, those problems, as I said in my speech, are going to multiply because this is the new reality that our farmers are facing. And I would say it's not just Conservatives who support farmers. One of the reasons why the Agriculture Committee gets along so well is because all parties around that table understand that they have farmers as constituents. And I think it's the only committee of the House of Commons that regularly works and makes decisions by consensus. But again, I would argue with the one point, though. Senators don't have constituents. We have constituents. And I acknowledge it's a problem. I don't agree that the Senate should be holding up a bill. But I gave countless examples of where Conservative senators did the exact same thing for other bills. And that's the hypocrisy that people need to understand when it comes to the Conservative Party. Senators should not be doing this. They should be listening to the democratic will of the House. I just simply wish that the Conservatives would have a consistent position no matter what bill is being discussed in the Senate.
I'm just sort of wondering why we couldn't use the air in here